The late afternoon sun dipped low over the dusty frontier town of Willow Ridge, washing everything in a golden haze that made even the broken wagon, wheels and worn-out storefronts look soft around the edges. People bustled slowly, as if the heat from the day still clung to their clothes and their bones. At the far end of the street, sitting on a rough wooden bench near the blacksmith's shop, was Clara May Briggs, a shy, heavy-set girl with kind eyes. A girl who'd heard more whispers behind her back than compliments in her life. She kept to herself mostly, sewing for townsfolk, tending to chickens, and caring for her lonely mother. Clara's size made her the target of ridicule in a town where appearances were judged more harshly than actions. But behind her gentle smile lay a heart stronger than most. That afternoon she sat alone, softly rocking in her lap a baby, swaddled in a thin brown blanket, a newborn she had found abandoned near the creek earlier that morning. She had taken him to Doc Fletcher, but the old man had shaken his head helplessly. The child was weak, hungry, wailing with a frailness that chilled Clara to the bone. The baby needed milk, and there was none to be found. Clara had held him close all afternoon, trying to calm him, her heart breaking with each tiny cry he made. And that was when he appeared, Samuel Colt, the cowboy known throughout Willow Ridge for being a rough rider with hands hardened by ranch work and eyes that never seemed to soften for anyone. Except today, his gaze held something else, desperation. He came rushing down the street, his boots kicking up dust as he moved, his chest rising and falling like a man who'd been running a long way. When he finally dropped to one knee in front of her, Clara stared at him in shock. Samuel rarely spoke to her beyond a polite nod at the general store. But here he was, breathless, vulnerable, and staring at the baby with a kind of fear that made Clara forget everything she knew about him. "Clara, please," he said, clutching his hat in one shaking hand. "Can you nurse him? Just for once. I don't know how else to save him." Clara felt her breath catch. "Samuel, you think He's my sister's boy," he cut in quickly. "She passed last night in childbirth. I'm all he has. And you're the only woman in town who—" He stopped, realizing how his words might sound, but Clara understood. The town's women were mostly elderly, unmarried, or unable to nurse. The nearest homestead with nursing mothers was miles away, too far for such a delicate child. Clara had never had a child of her own, but she'd been a wet nurse once, years ago, to help neighbors' twins survive. She had sworn never to speak of it, embarrassed by the rumors that followed. But Samuel must have heard the stories whispered behind barn doors and saloons. His voice broke. "Clara, please. He won't last the night." Clara looked down at the baby, this tiny, helpless creature whose life hung by the thinnest thread. Tears welled in her eyes as the infant whimpered weakly, his face pale, his breathing shallow. She felt something shift inside her, a deep, aching pull that urged her to cradle him closer. "But why me?" she whispered. "Why would you trust me?" Samuel swallowed hard. His jaw clenched as though he were fighting back emotions he'd never shown anyone. "Because you're the only person in this town who's never turned away someone in need," he said softly. "Because you're kind. And right now, kindness is the only thing that can save him." Clara's heart twisted. For the first time in her life, someone had looked at her and seen more than her size, more than the gossip, more than the girl who lived quietly in the corner of everyone's vision. Samuel saw her heart, and that alone made her hands tremble as she nodded slowly, pulling the baby toward her as she shifted nervously. Samuel lowered his head respectfully and turned away to give her privacy even in the middle of the street. People watched from a distance, curious whispers floating around them like dust. But Clara ignored them. All she saw was the tiny boy in her arms, this child who had known more loss in one day than she had in her lifetime. She held him close, whispering soothing words as she offered him the nourishment he desperately needed. At first, the baby was too weak to respond, and fear clawed at Clara's chest. But then slowly, faintly, he latched on. His tiny body relaxed as he began to feed. A soft cry escaped Clara's lips, not of sadness, but relief so deep it overwhelmed her. Samuel turned back just enough to see the baby drinking. His shoulders slumped, his breath shuddered out, and he covered his face with both hands as if a lifetime of weight had just rolled off him. When he looked up, there were tears in his eyes, tears he didn't bother to hide. Clara had saved the child, but neither of them knew that this single moment would change all their lives forever. The soft glow of morning light filtered through the cracks of the barn walls, casting long golden stripes across the hay-strewn floor. Clara stood quietly near the stall door, gently rocking the baby boy who now slept comfortably in her arms. The night before had been chaotic, women whispering, men pacing, Samuel nearly breaking down every time the baby whimpered, but through it all, Clara remained calm, her instincts guiding her like a mother who'd known this child for years. She had nursed him 3 more times during the night, never once complaining, never once stepping away even when exhaustion tugged at her eyelids. The baby's breathing had grown stronger, his cheeks less pale, his tiny fists curling around the edge of Clara's dress as if he already knew she was the safest place in the world. "And Samuel?" He had barely taken his eyes off them. Now, as dawn broke, he approached quietly, careful not to startle the child. His face was tired, his hair a mess. But there was a softness to him Clara had never seen before, something new, something full of gratitude and awe. "How's he doing?" he whispered. Clara looked down at the sleeping infant and smiled gently. "Stronger," she replied. "Much stronger." Samuel exhaled deeply, the kind of breath a man gives when the fear that's been gripping his soul finally loosens. He stepped closer but hesitated, as if unsure whether he had the right to stand beside her. Clara noticed and gave him a reassuring nod. He came forward, resting a hand on the wooden stall beside her, leaning just enough to look at the baby's peaceful face. "Clara, I don't know how to thank you," he said, his voice tight with emotion. "You saved him. I wouldn't have made it without you. He wouldn't have made it." She swallowed softly. "I just did what anyone would have done." "No," Samuel said firmly. "Not anyone. People in this town turn their heads too quickly." "You didn't." Clara felt a familiar sting, memories of the townsfolk's laughter, their whispers, the judgment she carried every day like extra weight on her shoulders. But Samuel's tone was different. He wasn't pitying her. He was respecting her. That alone was enough to make her eyes lower shyly. The baby stirred and Samuel reached out instinctively, brushing a gentle finger across the boy's cheek. The tenderness in his touch surprised Clara, for a man known for breaking horses and hauling timber. He handled the newborn as if he were made of spun glass. "I named him Luke," Samuel whispered. "My sister always loved that name." Clara repeated it softly. "Luke." The name settled on the baby like a blessing. As the morning grew warmer, Samuel guided Clara outside where the world felt brand new. Townsfolk watched them pass, their expressions shifting from curiosity to surprise to something Clara never expected to see: respect. People whispered not about her size now, but about her bravery, her kindness, the miracle she had helped bring back from the edge. For once she wasn't invisible. For once she was the center of a story, not the shadow behind someone else's. They walked to a quiet patch of grass near the church, and Clara sat on a wooden bench while Samuel sat a respectful distance beside her. "I don't know what comes next," Samuel said, his voice low. "I ain't good at this. I ain't ever raised a child." Clara looked at him, noticing how the morning sun softened the lines on his face. "You'll learn," she said. "You love him. That's enough to start." He smiled, a small, hesitant smile, but the first genuine one she had ever seen on him. "Maybe, but I don't want to do it alone." Her breath caught. She wasn't sure what he meant, whether he was asking for help with Luke or hinting at something deeper. Samuel looked down at his hands, gathering courage before he spoke again. "Clara, you saved him, but you also saved me. You gave me hope when I had none left. I don't know how to repay that." Clara's heart pounded. "You don't need to repay anything." "I want to," he said softly. "I want you to stay in his life. I want you to stay in ours." She felt a warmth spread through her chest, slowly at first, then all at once, like a sunrise breaking after a long, cold night. She glanced at baby Luke, then at Samuel's hopeful eyes. Something inside her shifted once more. But this time it wasn't fear, it was possibility. A future she'd never imagined taking shape in front of her. A family she'd never dared to dream of. She nodded slowly, tears gathering in her lashes. "I'd like that," she whispered. Samuel let out a shaky breath, relief flooding his face. He reached out and gently placed his hand over hers, not grabbing, not assuming, just asking. She didn't pull away. Instead, she let her fingers curl beneath his in the softest, most natural acceptance. The 3 of them stayed there as the sun climbed higher, warming the world around them. A new beginning, fragile but real, took its first breath in the soft morning air. And so, The cowboy, the shy girl who had been overlooked all her life, and the tiny child who had brought them. Together began a story none of them had expected, but all of them needed.